Welcome to the Executive Lounge. My name is Inshira Ado, and this is a whole new season, season 5. It's awesome to have come this far, and we have not stopped. We're still bringing you the best minds, men and women who have blazed the trail, set examples where they've run, managed businesses both here at home and around the world. My guest today is a mechanical engineer with almost 4 decades of experience in the power sector. He is the co-founder and managing partner of Arthur Energy Advisors. He's Mr. Jabesh Amissah-Arthur. You're welcome to the Executive Lounge.
Thank you, thank you.
It's a pleasure to meet you, yes. And I mean, it's quite interesting that for you, you've sort of been in the energy space right from your days at VRA in 1979.
Yes, yes.
What a journey.
Yes, I don't know. Really, it wasn't a journey that I had predetermined. It just came up. In our time, you went for national posting wherever they posted you. There was no manipulation of national service, and I was just assigned to VRA, and that was my entry into power, and I've been there since.
Wow. At that point, was there any apprehension? Because of course you were posted and you had to go and live in Akosombo.
Yeah.
So that was different from where you originally would have lived.
Yeah.
Was there any apprehension in accepting the posting?
No, no. I was young, no thoughts, no care in the world, and it was a journey. We went on it, and luckily, at the time, VRA provided everything that you needed to live. They provided you a house with furnished house and so on. So there was no apprehension.
Wow.
We just went there, and then we started work, and you just had to focus on your work. So it was easy. No.
So you went in through national service, and then you rose through the ranks.
Exactly.
What was the journey like? I mean, would you say it was purely by dint of hard work? Were there leadership lessons that you picked along the way that helped you rise through the ranks?
It was a mixture of things. Certainly, hard work and diligence was a very important part, and then learning wisdom from people who had wisdom to share, and guidance from others on how to conduct yourself, and things you learn from all segments of society has brought me this far.
But in 1979, historically, I think that was a pretty turbulent time in our history. People were leaving the country. You happily accepted to do your national service at the time. Did it ever cross your mind to also jettison and just, get out of town?
Yes, certainly. I think that after I finished the national service, all my colleagues were looking for greener pastures. At the time, it was Nigeria. Nigeria was big then. So I did go to Nigeria during my vacation. Luckily for me, my sister was there. So I went there to see if greener pastures could work for me. I couldn't find a job that I liked. So I came back after my holidays, and I continued to work. And it's very interesting. A friend of mine, one of my best friends, we had a conversation about this, and he took a decision that we just put the two things together. If we stayed in Ghana, through the difficulties, what was the prospect for us? And if we went outside, what was the prospect for us? And it was a very funny kind of conversation. We looked at it and we said that, look, if we went outside the country, in probably 5 years, we could come back with enough money to buy the car we wanted, to buy a house, and so on and so on and so forth. But then we'll have to start the professional ladder from the beginning. And those of us who had stayed through would have been 5 years ahead. And from then, the one who has traveled will never catch up with us. And so by the time we have spent 10 years in any organization in Ghana at the time, they'll provide us the same comforts that the one who had gone outside had. And they will never catch up with us. So my friend and I decided that we'll stick out in Ghana.
Wow.
And that in the long term, it was a better decision than going to Nigeria, coming back with a 504, which after 6 years will break down.
That's right.
And then you'll be struggling because now you are 5 years behind.
And you're down the ladder as well.
So it was a conscious decision we took that we'll stay in Ghana.
How much of that analysis was founded in your training as an engineer?
I don't think that it was really to do with anything engineering, but it was something to do with our training in Mfantsipim, where we can. So we were looking forward. What will happen with this decision? How will it play out from year 10 going? Mm-hmm. And then based on that, we made a choice to suffer it for the period, and then we'll be fine.
Okay. Now that you mentioned Mfantsipim, let's talk about education. Would you be who you are today without the education of, going through Mfantsipim, doing an MPA at Harvard? Do you think it played a big part?
Certainly, it plays a big part in the formation of the character and the personality. Sometimes very little things change the path entirely. We have talked about one already. Mm-hmm. But I think that at Mfantsipim is where I discovered myself and my potential. And where I found that, I could really rub shoulders and match the best in Ghana, boot for boot, mm-hmm. academically speaking. And so suddenly, by the time I'd finished Mfantsipim, that confidence had come that academically you can match the best in the world. Mm-hmm. And so you don't have to fear anything. And anything you needed to study, if you put your mind to it, you could achieve it. And so that was very important. My time at Mfantsipim and my time at Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology gave me a solid grounding in the technical work and the mathematics and physics and all the technical knowledge I had. Mm-hmm. Harvard did something else for me. When I went to Harvard, I decided that I knew enough algebra and enough calculus that I didn't need to learn any more of that. But what I was missing was on the humanities side and how to relate to human beings, how to understand human actions and how to predict human actions. And so my time at Harvard was devoted primarily to understanding human behavior. Mm-hmm. And how people react to different things you do, and therefore how you should conduct yourself in those circumstances. So each stage was very helpful, okay, in forming the personality. Yeah.
Wonderful stuff. And I asked this question largely because there's a school of thought, or what may also be described as a present rhetoric, that our education doesn't prepare people for work, and there's a disconnect between what is required post-education from what is taught. Were you ready for the work environment when you came from school? Was there a certain correlation between what you were learning with what the workspace expected of you?
Yes, I would say this. The education had given the foundation to understand everything. And all through my career, I'm lucky in the sense that the organizations I worked with always had sufficient documentation. I started at the Akosombo Power Station, and they had all the manuals. And provided you were willing to read, you would understand what was going on and what you were supposed to do and how things were working. And at every point, if you had the grounding to understand what was happening, if you would read. Mm-hmm. I think that the major shortcoming is that quite a few people tend to think that the self-discovery part, where you find out what is going on and understand it for yourself, that part has become de-emphasized, and that's probably one of the big problems. That people have to understand that academics only gives you the foundation. You have to then employ that and read to understand what is going on this equipment, what is going on this system, how does this one work, how does that one work. You have the foundation. You now have to work towards reading it. If you are expecting somebody to drop it into your head, that's where the problem comes.
Okay. Now, let's go into your forte. You've worked in the power sector for close to 40 years. In fact, it is the 40th year.
Yes, it is.
So 40 years. And you've seen it all. At one point, Ghana's strides in that space was lauded globally. But in recent times, we've seen challenges with the power sector. And it is at the core of any economy that seeks to industrialize and grow at a sustainably decent rate. Let's start with what you think could have been better about our power sector.
I think that our sector, those of us who are old enough know the time when our sector operated without any assistance from government and everything ran smoothly. I think that probably if we had maintained that level of treating the power sector as a technical service that has to be delivered and allowed it to deliver as such, it would have been fantastic. It would have been fantastic for us. The sector began to go through certain changes. And it's the way those changes have been handled that has brought us to this point. An effort has been made to kind of put it back into a technical structure. And if we can get it to work that way, it will help. What do I mean? What I'm saying is that, take another example of, let's say, fuel prices. Mm-hmm. Do you remember the last time you had fuel shortage in Ghana?
No, maybe.
Does anybody remember?
No.
No.
Not of the magnitude in the 80s when we did.
And the reason is simple. The pricing mechanism for it was freed. Mm-hmm. And therefore, it is always working. And people are bringing in the products and they are delivering. And if the price has to be adjusted, it gets adjusted. And that was a model that the attempt was made to put the power sector on. In fact, that effort was made even earlier, before the petroleum, where a regulator was set up to independently set a price for the commodity so that it can be continuously provided. But then other things have happened, shortages have come, and interventions have been demanded and reacted, provided, that have brought us to where we are. But somewhere along the line, probably we should look at that again. That is the only way to have it in a sustainable footing.
You know, if you, borrowing from the example or the parallel you've drawn between the power sector and the petroleum sector, price deregulation has helped, but that became necessary. Mm-hmm. Because at one point the key stakeholders thought, okay, we've had enough of government intervention and interference. How do you advocate something like that for the power sector? And I ask that because, so I remember at one point Mr. Kwekwawachi was running VRA. Mm-hmm. I had an opportunity to have sat with him and heard the plans he had for VRA. Mm-hmm. And from a wet behind the ears, ignoramus in the space, mm-hmm. I felt that there were laudable things. Yeah. Then we had a power change or a change in government, and the guy's out of a job. Similarly, you run Bui Power. Mm-hmm. We have a new government. You're not in that office anymore. Mm-hmm. Have we, to the detriment of our development, allowed politics to determine what really is a technical space and professionals should be running it?
That the change of leadership in these organizations by themselves, with changing political winds, I don't have a problem with. The question is that the replacement must be knowledgeable and must be competent for what he's going to do. And the challenge has always been that when you put people there, they must be people who know what the effect of what you are doing today will be in 5-10 years' time. And if decisions are taken that are based on political cycles of what I can accomplish within my tenure, then it becomes a problem, because the power sector, if you are to build, let's say, a hydro dam, it will take you no less than 6 years. If you are to build anything else, it takes that long, or 4 years plus, to build. Now, when you have somebody whose focus is on showing results in 2 years and 3 years, then long-term planning that's required for the power sector becomes a problem. And he is unable to give it attention because what he's discussing now will not bear fruit in his tenure. So his incentive to put in the effort to pursue a project that is not going to materialize for 6 years, for 8 years, it becomes a, so that is what we must avoid. Is the change itself is not an issue for me, but people must have a tenure where they know that if I don't take the right decisions today, I'll be there when the problems for it come. When that is missing, then you get short-term and near-term decisions. So people are only interested in what can I do to solve the problem for the year 2, and then don't think about year 6 and year 8, which used to be the thing in the sector previously.
You know, you just opened my eyes to, and it's just incidental that we're actually filming in the Kwame Nkrumah suite of Villa Monticello, and my period spent perusing the 7-year development plan, the one from '61. At the time, we didn't have a massive economy that was super industrialized, but that was the vision to do that.
Yeah.
So in comes the Akosombo Dam,
Yeah.
and Valco. But there were plans to develop a lot of the other hydro, including Bui.
Yes.
All the way back then, that plan was there. Should we be going back to the cornerstone that we've despised as far as our power plan is?
In all humility, I think that there are certain sectors of the economy that, if it's possible, we should take away from facing the political cycles. And power is one. Because that service is required by all of us, and we require it to be delivered in a way that is the best, without political color. And those institutions should be taken out of the political realm. And as I've said, there's a reason why those institutions and their leadership should not be short-term. I think that when a leader is appointed for those institutions, he should be looking at 8 years, 10 years at least. Because then he has a reason. When we were at VRA, you always knew that if I don't take the actions I'm supposed to take today, the problem will come in 4 years and I'll still be here to face it, and I'll have a big problem. So you do the work that is required that far ahead. But if I know that in 4 years I'm gone, it will be somebody else's problem. Then you don't have such an inbuilt incentive to address it and do it with that. So that is what I think. That as a country, we must begin to understand that some of these institutions, it's best if we took it out of the political realm and let them function to deliver the service to all of us, devoid of political color. But it is not, let's not say that, I'm not blaming the politicians for it. Yeah. I'm blaming we the citizens. When we put pressure on the people we have elected to intervene in a situation, it's difficult for them not to. So if we are blaming them, I think that, for instance, if there's power shortage, we should be willing as citizens to hold the managers of those institutions responsible, not government. Because the moment you go to government, then the minister is compelled to intervene. And later, he'll be accused of interference. But if we had held the leadership of the institutions responsible and left the minister alone to defend this, then we will be getting somewhere. But I think that as a country, we must, a good number of us must come to the same conclusion in order for us to exert the effort to get that change to happen. Wonderful. But we must stop blaming governments and we must stop blaming ministers for certain things. And they must also stop trying to take credit for certain things that happen with these institutions. Because if you go and take credit for it, then when the problem comes, they will blame you for it as well. So the effort to set up, the decision to set up the independent regulators, PURC, that was the move to separate government from it. But I don't think we have achieved that because the citizens still hold the government responsible for power supply. So the minister goes to intervene.
Wow, that's a chicken and egg situation, and hopefully we can find a way around that.
Yeah.
We'll take a short break, and you're watching the Executive Lounge. My guest is Mr. Jabesh Amissah-Arthur. He's the managing partner of Arthur Energy Advisors. They have experience across the sub-region. He himself has 40 years of experience in the energy sector, and we're going to be learning a lot more about Ghana's energy mix, what the future holds for us, where should we be exploring next, what are the lowest hanging fruits that are available to us, and how can we truly be able to use the sector to drive our industrialization agenda. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Executive Lounge. I'm Inshira-Ado, and my guest is Mr. Jabesh Amissah-Arthur. He's the managing partner and co-founder of Arthur Energy Advisors, and they've been doing some excellent work across the sub-region and beyond. With 40 years of experience, I think you're rightly placed to help us imagine what we can do with our energy sector. Do we have the right mix at the moment? Because we've got some hydro and we've got some, thermal. Should we be exploring nuclear? Where do you find Ghana's optimal mix for energy and power?
Oh, I think that every country has to develop based on its energy resources. It's great that we have found natural gas in such quantities. We have the hydro. We have exploited, let's say, the majority of it that is exploitable. There's a little more of the hydro that can be done, but some of them are now in areas that are highly developed, and it will be too disruptive to build a reservoir for them now. So there are a few more hydros that could be done, but not too much. We have seen the natural gas making major contributions now. I think now that's the major source. It has overtaken hydro as a major provider. But natural gas has a lifespan. And so we have to continue the diversification. Currently, I think that solar is probably the most interesting. The developments in technology has reached a point where solar now can cost less than gas.
Wow.
And so I have been telling people that the next series of developments, we really have to look at solar. But solar also has its limitations because it can't produce in the night. And so it can only produce in combination or in hybrid with other sources and in complementation with other sources. So there's a certain amount of solar that we can do, given the hydros that we have and the gas thermal generation that we have. So we can do some solar. I think that we should. Nuclear, if you look at the technology, the newer technologies for nuclear don't have to be the size that they used to be. And so we have to really look at that too going forward, because as I've said, gas is holding the fort, but gas won't last forever. And then we have to go to other things. So I anticipate that between now and year 2030, we should be focusing on solar. And beyond 2030, we should be looking at introducing nuclear.
How would you, if you had to run this project, how would you go about not just the generation, but your advice on the distribution of power? For the lack of knowledge in this space, I believe in other places there's specific sources of generation targeted at maybe residential use and things like that. Is there a matrix that you think might put us in a great place to ensure consistently we get power that feeds industry and other sectors?
No, I don't believe in that separation. I don't think it's realistic to even imagine that separation could happen. The point is that the current that you get in your home, it doesn't care where it came from. The sources complement each other to deliver. And we just have to make that the sources are there, they are adequate, and they can meet the requirements. And it also helps to have a large size, to have stability. And so, yes, we can continue, but the sources all have to work together to deliver. And they complement each other, and that's the way it is. We cannot begin to say that this is for this and this is for that. If you do that, we'll have a big problem.
So hydro, we have a little bit of room to increase hydro. I remember when the BBLS project was starting, there were a number of people who said, no, it's not going to be worthwhile. I think if I'm not mistaken, the talk about the source of the water was not going to give you the kind of pressure you need to build a decent reservoir to generate the kind of power that you wanted. Would you say they were right or wrong in thinking that?
Oh, they were absolutely wrong. They were absolutely wrong. You know that the history of it is that the BBLS project had been, there was an initial effort to construct it, and actually it had been in competition with Akosombo. And Kwame Nkrumah, in his own style, had kind of played the Russian and American game. The Russians were developing BBLS, and the Americans were developing Akosombo. Unfortunately, when Nkrumah was overthrown and the Russian team was ejected from Ghana, they took all their documents away. They took everything away. They didn't leave anything behind. So we had to restart from scratch. But really, the two Akosombo is much bigger, but BBLS is also good. It's also a good project, and I'm happy that I was able to be part of realizing it.
Let's talk a little bit about BBLS. Yeah. How strategic is it as a source of power generation for us, especially at the time where, I mean, by your own admission, Akosombo is bigger, and we also have all these other complementary sources. Could we have done without it?
No, we couldn't. And we couldn't have done without BBLS. Actually, it was even late. It should have come in a little earlier. And when you look at price-wise, it produces energy at a lower price than all the thermal plants. So why would you not do it?
It makes economic sense.
It makes economic sense. Although Akosombo is much more economic than BBLS, but let's say that the thermals the best price for the thermals are around 12 cents. BBLS is around 10 cents. because we didn't construct it 40 years ago as Akosombo was, because so it's now, Akosombo is supposed to be around 5 cents. So yes, Akosombo, nobody can compare with Akosombo, but Bui is a good project, and it's helping to hold the price of electricity down.
What are areas would you say today, outside of the areas that you believe are far too populated to warrant the disruption of building a hydro? If you had to, between now and 2030, while you're building your solar capacity, where would you cite, or how many hydros do you think would be enough to augment the mix?
No, the remaining hydros will never be enough to adequately make up the growth. They will not. They can make a contribution, but they will not be enough. They can't.
Would you do it if you had the responsibility? Would you still say, well, it would make the adequate, but it will contribute, and I'll still go ahead and do it? Or would you rather turn your attention to, say, maybe wind?
Hydros depend on specific projects and what the specific projects will do. Some of the largest projects that are remaining on the hydro are Juale, which is on the Oti River. And the challenge for that one, for instance, is that it's a flat area. It's not as hilly as Akosombo, and it will flood a large area, probably including parts of Togo. And so you will need an international agreement to do that. Otherwise, if you try to maintain the reservoir within Ghana, it's going to be a smaller project. So it has hurdles that you have to resolve. There are other projects, smaller projects on the Pra River, but the Pra Basin is heavily settled, and you have to really weigh the cost of relocating people and upsetting their lifestyle and versus what you'll get. There are a few others in the north, but they can't make such a big contribution. They help, but they can't make a big contribution. So it's not a question of just focusing on one or leaving other. We have to work on them all.
Quite a lot of the time, our friends across the Atlantic tend to get a bit of flack that they think of Africa as one country when we have more than 54 countries in here. But really, that's what it is. It's one landmass, and the water sources are all connected. Yeah. Do you think that as we're busy trying to go down the echo and have a single currency, we probably should be looking at an integrated power sector for the sub-region, and will that help?
Certainly. And there's an organization in place. I mean, that has been one of the principal decisions of the ECOWAS. So there's a West African power pool, and there's, for instance, there's a regulatory body for the whole of ECOWAS. That's called IRERA. That's supposed to be the regulator for trade in the whole sub-region. And many years ago, probably, I think it was around year 2000, I may have the dates wrong, but the ECOWAS heads of state decided and passed something on the free movement of power and energy in the sub-region. And so the setup is in place, work is going on to build a network across the whole of West Africa such that there can be free trade in energy across the sub-region. It has been slow in being realized, but it's still going forward.
Do you think you'll ever see the light of day?
Oh, yes. I have had the privilege of working on some of those projects. You know that right now, from Nigeria to Ghana, through Togo, Benin, Ghana, and Cote d'Ivoire, we are interconnected in a substantial way, and we do exchange them. There's a project going on now that will link from then Cote d'Ivoire to Liberia to Sierra Leone and on to Guinea.
Okay.
And that is being constructed, and I'm sure that it will be commissioned very shortly. So it will happen. It's just that it has been slower. Regional cooperation on energy and power has been slower than we all wished, but the work is going on, and we'll get there.
What do you think has accounted for the slow pace? If we're members of a common economic area, supposedly we're ascribing to the same value system. So why should we not see urgency in this?
We see urgency on the global perspective. But then when you get to the individual countries, the citizens have their own way of applying pressure. In a situation of shortage, each country wants to satisfy itself first. I know that that whenever we were short of power in Ghana, there was extreme pressure on us as the power sector to cut off Togo Benin and only supply ourselves with the little we had. That's the kind of pressure you face. And we were always arguing that, look, we have been supplying Togo Benin since 1972. They have been dependent upon us. It will be absolutely irresponsible to cut them off just because you have a shortage. So what we have been able to do in the past is to proportionately everybody reduce his consumption. But that is the kind of pressure you face. And when the infrastructure has been developed by one country, it becomes difficult for the citizens to understand that we have to share it with our neighbors. And so what is happening now is developments are taking place that are not funded by one country. So these transmission lines now are being funded from a sub-regional perspective. And therefore, no one country can claim priority or exclusivity of it. And that is when the trade will happen.
You know, there's a concept of growth without spending, cost saving, right? I think the Ford Corporation applied that during the global meltdown, where they found ways to improve efficiencies and not necessarily spend. I think they posted some 3 billion or so profits over a year period when people were really on the brink of collapse. I'd like to borrow that example at the risk of falling flat on my face and ask your thoughts on why we haven't seen a government-backed process that allowed homes to, so like for example, people have advocated, some people have advocated that we should have a removal on taxes on all solar components. So homes can have solar. Majority of people, I mean, we're not in our homes right now. So industries that might need power 24/7 can fall heavily on the current power sources that we have. And the homes can generate during the day, have the inverters kicking in the evenings, and power the homes. I'm guessing that you think it would be a good idea.
To a certain extent. To a certain extent, it will be a good idea. But a lot of work has gone on. I think that, for instance, the more important thing is demand-side management, efficiency in the use. I think that everybody in Ghana now has seen the labels on fridges and air
from
conditioners,
red to green. That's right.
Showing we were all here when we made the transition from incandescent bulbs to the CFLs, and now there are LED bulbs. Those are things that really save in the consumption and therefore save in the additional infrastructure required. That solar production on an individual basis can help, but we shouldn't overhype it, because it can't replace the conventional sources. It can only supplement and so on to a certain extent. And there's even a limit to how much of the solar you can do before it starts to create its own problems. I was in Senegal recently, and they have achieved solar penetration of about 20%, just short of 20%, and they are beginning to get significant problems arising from integrating solar. It's a technical problems they call harmonics. There are harmonic oscillations and so on that are really worrying them now. So there's a limit to how much solar you can integrate in your entire network.
In layman terms, this has got to do with how solar interfaces with conventional power?
It's how solar is converted by the inverter to let it mimic actual supply. Mm-hmm. And it's the frequencies that are generated create a problem as the harmonics.
So it's a good thing, but it has its limitations.
It has its limitations.
How about, so, I mean, the world is talking about, yeah, let's go green, let's cut emission here, let's cut that. So we've got natural gas, which really is a byproduct of fossil fuel.
Yeah.
If we're going to jump on that bandwagon and go green, how will we achieve that?
It is that natural gas is cleaner than the others that many people have used. A typical example is coal. Mm-hmm. And so it does save quite a bit if you do it that way. So that is what it is. But as I've said, I think that the thing is, I was reading an article a few days ago. The whole world is, and the Green Revolution is beginning to recognize that the Green Revolution cannot go as far as they want unless they find a way to incorporate nuclear in it. Mm. And I firmly believe that ultimately the world will realize that nuclear is probably the way it should go. It has its problems with safety, but they can be managed. Mm. And that is the way to go.
Oh, I think there have been far fewer nuclear accidents than there have been hydro accidents.
Yes, yes, yes.
Well, we're going to take our final break, and when we come back, we will learn some more from my guest, Mr. Jabesh Amissah-Arthur. This is the Executive Lounge. Don't go away. Welcome back to the Executive Lounge with me, Inshira Ado, and my guest, Mr. Jabesh Amissah-Arthur. He is the managing partner and co-founder of Arthur Energy Advisors, AEA. And, you know, we've learned quite a bit about power. I think I'm a mini expert after this conversation. I have at least some 1% of extra knowledge that I can bully some people with. Yeah. You know, but on a more serious note, you've worked in the sector all your life, and you co-founded this business, still in the sector. Why?
The reason we set up Arthur Energy Advisors is that we found that the energy sector had reached a point where we needed good advice for the sector to make progress. Mm-hmm. And we needed good advice that also had an understanding of local culture and local insights. And that's why we set it up. And one of the things that I had learned in my career, because I had spent a lot of time doing the analytical work with external consultants, and the difference I found between them and us was that we were capable of doing the analytical work. It was the presentation of the thinking and the logic and the rationale for the decisions that you are recommending, that they paid a lot of attention to how to present the findings from the analytical work that sometimes I had done. And it impressed me that is the only way for us to persuade our own to understand it. And so we've dedicated ourselves to doing the analytical work and also paying attention to how it's presented, such that somebody can look at it and say, yes, this is what I want to do.
Wow. So essentially, what may seem a minuscule part of the process actually makes or breaks the deal.
Yes, yes. And it is presentation of the thinking and the wisdom that you have obtained from the analytical work.
Okay.
Sorry. Yeah, but most of the time, we have all done the same analytical work, but how to bring that thought and that insight to the decision maker so that he can nod his head and say, yes, this is what I agree, this is what I need to do. That's the difference.
I'm thinking about, you know, have we failed or lagged behind as a continent or as a country, as a people, because of that little thing? Because I'm beginning to think, okay, so we have cocoa, why don't we own the chocolate factories?
Yeah.
We have gold, why don't we have all the gold refineries and things like that? It's that possibly the missing jigsaw.
I think that is part of it. I think that's a part of it. One, the thinking, the long-term planning and the long-term thinking, and the presentation of the thought that you have, such that it's persuasive to the decision maker. This is what I want to do. That I believe is part of the story.
Is it down to the way we educate our people?
I'm not sure I can say that, but I just know that learning to persuade is something that we should do. Quite often, people try to persuade by saying, "Believe me, trust me." That doesn't work so well. If you can translate the steps of your thinking on paper such that it's persuasive.
So then it allows the other person to arrive at the conclusion you wanted.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. Learn something new every day. Let's focus on you as a person. What kind of values drive you? You seem very. I mean, it's quite interesting. And I've met your late brother on a couple of occasions, and well, it stands to reason you're related. But there's a certain mild manneredness about the two of you. Is this something you, from the environment you grew up in, was it deliberate?
Probably. I can't put my finger on it. I may have a guess, but I think that we had our father, who is everybody's role model, everybody's father is his role model, was calm and thoughtful and didn't talk a lot. He was just thoughtful and considerate in what he was doing, and then he just says it once after thinking through. And probably, I'm guessing that is where it comes from. But one of the things that we learned when we were young, my mother was a homemaker, and then she engaged in a little bit of baking in order to support the family income. And we as children were we were the labor force for it. And it may be hard for people to believe, but we had to wake up at 4:30 in the morning, and she used to bake coconut biscuits for sale. And we had to wake up in the morning, and we had to grate the coconut and finish that before we go and dress up and bath and go to school. So you had to wake up at 4:30. And so we grew up with waking up early. And later on in life, I saw that was a great attribute. And so I decided not to lose it. And up to this day, I'm up by 4:30 every day.
Wow.
So before the rest of my team can wake up, I've had 4 hours lead on them in preparing for the day.
And that always puts you in good stead.
And it has served me very well. And I promised myself that this I would never lose. So even if I don't have anything to do, 4:30 I'm out of bed.
At least your brain will have a 4-hour lead on everyone else.
Yes.
So the thing about life, and I'm sure the loss of your brother was, it was painful for everyone, including me, because the gym, that specific gym was a gym that I had worked out in and used to until I relocated to where I live now, so I didn't trek there very much. For you, it'd be a greater loss.
Yeah.
How did you deal with it?
I don't know. Honestly, I don't think I've dealt with it. I think that part of me is, even up to today, still in denial. I haven't brought myself to acknowledge it yet.
Wow.
I think that I just went through, just saw it as a job to do what had to be done to see him off. But internally, I'm still struggling. I haven't dealt with it.
So, I mean, how would you say this adversity compares to anything you've ever come across? And how has it shaped you, even as you're still dealing with it?
I've forgotten where I learned it from, but somewhere along my life, someone said this, and I thought it was true, and I've tried to live by it, that when the going is good, everybody is a nice guy. Everybody, every woman is a nice guy when things are going well. That the difference between the person who would be successful and others who will crash is how they conduct themselves during periods of adversity. Whether it's financial adversity, emotional adversity, or whatever other form, material adversity, how does a human being conduct himself in adversity? And that's what makes a difference between those who would make progress and those who would crash and burn. And so in my career, I have always told myself that whenever there was adversity, one should pay attention and continue to do what he has to do and do it well. There's a funny example I tell people that quite often young men come to me and say, my boss is frustrating me, I don't feel like working again. I mean, I go to work, they don't give me anything to do and so on. And I laugh at them, I say that, look, this is a great opportunity. One, you have two paths to take. Either because your boss doesn't like you, so you wouldn't do the work well, and if he gives you work, you wouldn't do it, or you wouldn't do it well. That is one path to take. Or you say, despite that, when I get work, I'm going to do it excellently well. Now, and I tell you, if you take path one, that you want to do your work well, we are human. Within a few weeks, a few months, a few years, that boss will be gone and there'll be a new boss. And he'll come and see your work. And either he's going to say, oh, no wonder he has been sidelined because he doesn't do his work well. Or the new boss will say, why has this gentleman been sidelined? He's such a fantastic worker, and promote you. That nobody, as a professional for instance, nobody can undo you. Nobody can damage your career unless you yourself allow it to be damaged.
Well, that leads me to what I think will be our final question for this conversation. Is, whether we like it or not, there's a lot of political interference and influence in where we find ourselves in certain jobs. So for quite a number of people, say, well, you had BUI because your brother at the time was the vice president of the country, and you run the BUI Park project. Now, you're no longer there because there's a new government. So it's easy for the perception to kind of almost hold to be true. But how do you, and politics is also viewed as a poison chalice, right? So, you kind of get tainted. How have you been able to keep your dignity, your reputation, and your pedigree in spite of changing government and not running BUI Power? You pay attention to your reputation. I had always, one of the other things that I knew was that from a very early part of my career, I came to the realization that the 10 people who work with me are either going to be my best promoters or they are going to undo me. That the image that those immediate 10 people have of me will have a major impact on what reputation I have outside, because they will tell the next 10 and they will tell the next 10. So I have always paid attention to the image I create for myself and the reputation I build with those working with me. Anybody who has come into contact with my work should be able to testify the way I want them to testify. And with that, I have found that you are stable. Changing governments. I was a deputy at VRA some time ago, and again, for whatever reason, I was asked to relinquish, and so I did. I can tell you that it didn't take me 3 months to find work. And how did it happen? Staff from development agencies like the World Bank
called me and said, "Oh, we hear that you have left VRA now. Are you available for work?" I said, "Yes." They said, "Come, we need you. We need you to go here and go and do this. We need you to go here and there." I didn't rest for one moment. And it's because they had seen my work in working with them, and they knew what I could do, and they offered me. And that is the same approach we have adopted for the AEM, that our work should speak for us. We are unable to take adverts. I don't advertise myself or anything. But people will come to us at AEM now and say that, "Oh, we saw the report you did for company YYY. We want you to do this work for us." And that is how we have grown. So reputation for me is most important.
Wonderful. And that's a great point for us to end our conversation.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jabesh Amissah-Arthur, for talking to us on the Executive Lounge.
Thank you, Inshira.
Right.
It's been a pleasure being with you.
It has for me. And this is, one of the conversations I wish we could just carry on with, but we'll explore the
Maybe we should have started it in the
in the barber salon because we met just before we had this interview. Yes. So for me, 5 things I'm taking away from this conversation today is that number 1, that you should plan, long-term planning. Whether you went in fancy pim or not, it helps. Okay, Jing Shakan. So you think about where you are now, you think about where you want to go, and you think far into the future and build the steps to get there. Number 2 is the very last thing about reputation. It will make or make you. And you start by working on yourself, building character, and ensuring that the people around you are the ones who are seeing that true colors of yours, because they will be your ambassadors, or they will be the ones who will go and sell you out. And number 3 is that your choice of how you take the opportunities that come to you will determine where you go. So you can choose to hit a home run if you're thrown a curveball, or you can choose to dodge it, and you may have your 3 strikes and be out. Number 4 is that you keep wise counsel. Learn wisdom from those who have it to give. And there's a statement that says there's no bad lesson in life, that even those who get it wrong have something to teach you, and they'll teach you how not to do it. So it abounds around us, wisdom abounds, and we have to go around looking for it and pursuing it. And for me, the final thing is that you must be determined that what you do will be meaningful. And it's evident in the way that Jabesh has decided that throughout his life, he was going to make his work speak for him. And it's not just him, but it's also an ethos that he's carried into the energy advisory company that he's co-founded. And with that, I say thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll be back again with more of this. And this show was filmed at Villa Monticello, who are friends, and can be seen across the continent of Africa on DSTV channel 421. Take care. God be with you. Go forward. Make rain. Shalom. Is this something you learned? Were you born an entrepreneur?
You got to start small.
I have not allowed being a woman to hold me back.
Credibility is not just making money, it's about making sure that people trust what you're doing.
Law practice is not only about going to court, it's about advice.
It's very difficult to hire somebody who's not motivated and then make them motivated.
One of the things that I'm known for is integrity.
They have to see you as a person of integrity.
Welcome to the Executive Lounge. I'm Inshira Ado.